Well, for having me on. I think that the first thing that we have to reckon with is that race is not an adequate um, analytic. It's not an adequate way of looking at the situation to understand how indigenous communities operate. For example, seeing me, no one would assume that I'm from a tribal community, right? Because I have got this pale skin, these blue eyes, but I am a citizen of Catawba Nation. And so one of the problems for tribal communities is that the way that we discuss it in the United States gets reduced to race, which is there. People do experience, indigenous people do experience racism. But what's more important for my work, at least, is understanding that indigenous communities are sovereign communities. And so, saying, when someone says to me, for example, you don't look Catawba, you don't look Native American, it is similar to someone saying, you don't look like a citizen of the United States, because that is where I come from as a citizen of Catawba Nation.
I want to get your take on some of the initiatives that were mentioned in our story, what the Biden administration is hoping to accomplish. And to that point, how has America discouraged Native Americans and other minority groups from keeping their cultures?
Yeah, I mean, this is a deep topic, and it transcends borders, right? Because it's not just the United States that has taken part in these processes. And what people don't realize in the United States a lot of the time is that the strategy of colonization, right, which is the taking of indigenous land, is not limited to one strategy. I mean, a lot of people know stories of tribal communities being attacked and brutalized through military action. A lot of people in the United States know about tribal removal, making tribes march thousands of miles to a new homeland. But then also assimilation is a part of this process. The act of trying to teach our children, our ancestors, that they are no longer parts of tribal communities. All of these work together, and that is not what we teach in our school system for the most part.
I want to get your quick reaction to this recent story out of Canada, the discovery of indigenous children's bodies outside of a school, hundreds of remains found.
My response is that it is horrific, and my heart is with the families who are thinking about their relatives who never returned home. And my mind is in the place of, this is not a one-time thing. This is something that was happening across the board in Canada, across the board in the United States, and across the board in lots of other countries that were implementing these policies of assimilation through residential schools. So I am in solidarity with activists in so-called Canada and the United States who are calling for an across-the-board assessment of the number of unmarked burials in these residential schools.
And very quickly, about 10, 15 seconds left, you're in Mexico. It has one of the largest indigenous populations in Latin America. We see this all over South America as well. Every country there has an indigenous population that is marginalized.
I am here on a vacation, and it is so apparent to me the ways in which indigenous culture gets subsumed into the ways of making money in these places. And I do not fault indigenous people for doing that because they must survive. I think it's really on politicians to reassess how policies affect indigenous communities.